and Ms. Joretta Fernandes, Member of Parliament for the APNU. Today's press statement will be read in three parts, and we will begin with a reading from MP Flue-Bess.
Good morning. PPPC governance by concealment, scapegoating, and intimidation must end. APNU calls for truth, independent accountability, and protection of citizens' rights. Accountability is not the enemy of compassion. It is proof that the government values every life and every right. A partnership for national unity extends its continuing sympathy and solidarity to the families, survivors, and communities scarred by the MV Barima disaster. Their grief must never be converted into a public relation opportunity, a political shield, or a mechanism for closing legitimate claims before the truth is known. Our concern is the conduct of the political executive. It attempts to manage information, transfer blame downward, and leave ministers untouched, while ordinary workers and citizens bear life-altering negative consequences. What has occurred since the MV Barima tragedy cannot be viewed in isolation. We saw the same attitude after the Mahdia fire. We see it again in the treatment of citizens demanding accountability, and even in the president's own public outreach at charity. The approach is becoming familiar. Control the narrative, disclose only what pressure compels, transfer responsibility downward, and treat demands for accountability as an attack on the government. MV Barima, an attempt cover-up, cannot replace accountability. The July 18 sinking of the state-owned MV Barima is one of the gravest maritime disasters in Guyana's history. Public reporting established that the vessel was 87 years old, that the initial passenger count had to be substantially revised, and that many persons aboard were not recorded on the manifest. Those facts require the government to secure and publish the vessel's inspection, maintenance, loading, manifest, seaworthiness, and emergency response records. Instead, from the morning of the tragedy, serious questions arose about whether the government's priority was to establish and disclose the truth or to control the information reaching the Guyanese public. It began with misleading statements by the Prime Minister on the morning of the tragedy. The pattern was established early. Control the narrative first and disclose only what pressures compel. Then came restrictions on independent access to survivors. These were the people who could tell the country what they saw and experienced aboard the MV Barima. Restricting journalists' access to them prevented those eyewitnesses' accounts from reaching the public independently of the government's version of events. Then came the arrest of the surviving crew and the good superintendent. The DPP later advised murder charges against the captain, the chief mate, and the goods superintendent. The consequences cannot be ignored. The accused now be held without bail, except in exceptional circumstances, and are effectively removed from the normal access to media and by extension the public. Yet, these are the people who may possess critical first-hand information about the vessel and what happened immediately before it sank. The murder charges may also limit what they can tell the Commission of Inquiry. They now face criminal proceedings arising from the very events the Commission is supposed to investigate and must consider their right against self-incrimination and anything they say could affect their defense. We therefore have an extraordinary situation in which some of the people who may know the most about what happened aboard the MV Barima have been charged for murder and could be constrained in what they can tell the very commission established to find out what happened. That creates, at minimum, the appearance that the answer has been supplied before the inquiry has completed the investigation. Meanwhile, the first visible punitive consequences fell on the workers. The ministers and senior office holders remained in place. Criminal liability, administrative failure, and ministerial responsibility are distinct questions. One cannot be used to erase the other. The manner in which the Commission of Inquiry was established makes matters worse. The Commission is a creature of the President. It was established by the President. Its members were selected by the President, and its mandate and terms of reference were determined without meaningful consultation with the opposition, victims, representatives, and other important stakeholders. The Commission must be free to follow the evidence wherever it leads, including to ministers, senior officials, and regulators. Minister Edghill and Indar must go. They cannot remain politically isolated or insulated while workers face the most serious criminal charges. Accountability that stops below the level of political leadership is not accountability. It is blatant protection by dictatorship.
Thank you. MP Duncan.
Thank you very much. Guyanese, the President has announced the HEART Initiative, a framework for financial assistance to survivors and bereaved families, while repeatedly insisting that this announcement is not compensation. Compassionate support is not necessary, or rather is necessary, and should be immediate. But calling a payment assistance does not settle the legal and governance questions. No final framework, eligibility criteria, schedule of payments, standard agreements, or safeguards against waivers of legal rights have been placed before the public. Public money distributed after a disaster involving a state vessel is not a private charity. The PPP cannot use taxpayers' money to buy itself out of providing accountability to the very taxpayers whose money it is spending. Assistance to grieving families does not remove the government's obligation to explain what happened, establish responsibility, and answer for failures of the states. It does not negate those responsibilities. We are asking for the rules, aggregate sums, sources of funds, and for the legal terms to be placed in the public domain. This is the government's responsibility. No survivor or bereaved relative should be required to sign away future claims as a condition for receiving such urgent assistance. If payments are on a humanitarian basis only, then publish the documents that prove it. Until then, Guyanese have every reason to fear a repeat of Madia. Agreements that were described as assistance, but drafted to settle claims. At Madia, we remember 20 children died in that Madia dormitory fire of May 21st, 2023. The Commission of Inquiry concluded that the fire was deliberately set, but it also documented some serious failures by the state. An unequipped and ill-prepared fire station was one of the things pointed out in the COI. Unanswered requests for essential equipment, a prior inspection classifying the dormitory as high risk, and inadequate fire protection were just some of the issues that came out of the COI and that directs responsibility at the state. Individual criminal conduct and state negligence, Guyanese, can coexist. The PPPC cannot point to the alleged act of a child and pretend that ignored warnings, unsafe infrastructure, failed fire protection, and poor leadership all disappear. And yet, no comparable ministerial consequence followed the official findings. As a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, the minister then responsible for the Minister of Education was not even called before that COI. Before the commission of inquiry has been even convened in the current instance, families were asked to sign, or rather in the Mother instance, families were asked to sign agreements accepting $5 million described as financial aid, but stated to constitute settlement of all claims arising from that horrific fire. How callous could one government be? The existence and legal effect of those agreements became public only when the media began reporting. In June 2026, the acting Chief Justice rejected the government's application to strike out the lawsuits brought by relatives and allow the case to proceed. What a caring government we have. And for any doubts, I meant that very sarcastically. Now look at Barima. Look at this MV Barima issue. Again, individual conduct is placed at the center of the public narrative, while questions of systemic and political responsibility remain elusive. Again, financial arrangements with grieving families are surrounded by questions about transparency and legal rights. Guyana has seen this movie before. We have seen this approach before, PPP. However, this time, advocacy will continue to ensure that government acts in the best interest of citizens, not its political cabal, not in the interest of the PPP's political cabal. I thank you.
From controlling the narrative to victimizing those who demand accountability. Citizens participating in the nationwide Float the Boat protests are demanding accountability for the MV Barima tragedy, and they must not be victimized for doing so. Yet vendors were unceremoniously evicted from the precinct of the Lenore Secondary School following their participation in the protests. Citizens should not have to wonder whether peaceful protests will cost them their livelihood. 3 women engaged in peaceful protests at the National Vigil for the MV Barima victims were also detained for about an hour. Police later dropped the threatened charges and apologized. The apology does not erase the message sent to every citizen who considers publicly challenging the government. And this intolerance is not confined to Barima. At President Ali's outreach charity on August 10, 2026, a resident was removed before the meeting had even started. A taxpayers-funded outreach is not a private party meeting. Citizens are not props in a presidential production. The purpose of outreach is to hear from citizens, including those who are angry and frustrated, not merely those who will applaud. The government must say who ordered the removal, under what authority, and release the complete official record of what occurred. The execution must not stop, the executive, should not stop dictating who has access, and they must be humble as public servants make demands. APNU immediately demands. The APNU demands publication and independent preservation of the MV Barima records and unrestricted access by the Commission of Inquiry to evidence and witnesses. The Commission must be allowed to examine operational, administrative, administrative and political responsibilities. The government must publish the HART framework, eligibility rules, aggregate payments, funding sources, and standard agreements. Urgent assistance must not require families to surrender their legal rights. There must be an end to retaliation against witnesses, protesters, journalists, and citizens exercising their democratic right. The treatment of the float the boat protesters and the removal of a resident from the president's charity outreach must be independently reviewed. The government must complete media accountability and disclose the financial arrangements made with families. And ministers Edghill and Indar must go. Political leadership cannot demand that ordinary workers carry the consequences of systemic failure while ministers continue with business as usual. The PPPC calls scrutiny politicizing tragedy. APNU says the opposite. Accountability honors the dead, protects the living, and prevent the next disaster. Guyana deserves a government that tells the truth before managing the optics, protects citizens before protecting its image, and treat public office as a trust, not an entitlement. The pattern must end. Concealment when facts are inconvenient, scapegoating when responsibility reaches upward, and intimidation when citizens refuse to remain silent. I thank you.
Thank you. At this time, the floor is open for questions on the press statement. And of course, you do so by the raise of hand and stating your media house. Floor is open for questions. I see the hand of Mr. Adam Harris, I believe.
Yeah, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
For Mr. Yes. This question is for Mr. Duncan. Sir, you talked about the government announcing some sort of a package for the survivors and relatives of victims of the MV Barima. When was this announcement made and what was this package?
Thank you, Adam. A very good morning again. Now, that is the clarity that we're seeking, and that is some of the questions that we're asking. This is part of the HART initiative. And what we're saying is that we've seen this movie before in the Madia dormitory fire, and we don't want to repeat when monies that were given as aid, whether it's a $300,000 for a funeral or $500,000, because they don't seem to be any standard. The paperwork, we don't have any access to what this plan looks like. If it's a one size suit all, or it's on a needs basis, and that is what we want to come to. But underlying all of that, we want to ensure that people are not signing away any future right that they have to litigation. And we know what happened in the Madia case. Thankfully, the courts have said that the arrangements that these families signed onto cannot stand, and that is why it said that the Madia issue can go forward in terms of the court proceedings. But we don't even want it to get there. We want people to be able to access the courts if they feel aggrieved, because we see a lot of state responsibility here. This is not just down to these three individuals. These are the two crew members and the one person from Transport and Harbors. But we see significant state responsibility here as well. And that is why, as I think it was my colleague MP Flue-Bess who articulated, what happened in the immediate aftermath of this disaster, right? You saw the minister digging in his heels on what was on the manifest in terms of both cargo and and passengers, and then you see a revision continually until now. We don't have a full sense of what was on this boat, and we believe also that is part and parcel why they don't want to float the boat, because they know that they will be found severely culpable in terms of the number of passengers that were on board far exceeds this 179, and the cargo that was on board as well far exceed the capacity for this vessel. And for all of the commentary we have heard from the victims, from the survivors of this horrific disaster, is that in both cases, the government was in breach. And that is why we say we are very concerned, because we've seen this movie before where people are coerced, and your question pertains to what exactly is the package, and that is what we are asking. What exactly is the package? And we have scoured all of the reports. We saw the president meeting recently with the persons for this heart initiative, and we still cannot get a full sense of what it entails. But this is a government that is accustomed to operating in the shadows, and in this case, the dark shadows, but we are not going to allow it. We're going to keep the protests up. Indar and Edghill must go, and we want transparency on this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Another question then, if no one is ready, another question.
Go right ahead.
MV Finance said that some vendors who protested were evicted from the Leonora Secondary School. All of that might be true, but the government always says, produce the evidence. How can we conclude on that these vendors were evicted because they protested?
Thank you for the question, Adam. The answer is quite simple. There is the fact, and there is assumption. The fact remain that they were not asked to leave the precinct of the Leonora Secondary School prior to engaging in protest activities. It was only after they went to protest were they asked to leave. Only after they protested, they were evicted. So that entails a direct correlation between their action to protest and the action of the government to have them evicted from the precinct. And I want to say for there's not just the vendors, I have heard, I've had reports even from the young people that have their silent protest. We call it a Gen Z silent protest that's organized by students from the University of Guyana. Some young people that were engaged and continue to be engaged in that protest activity, a silent protest. They're just standing there on the St. John Road, opposite the office of the president, just holding up a placard, keeping no noise, saying nothing, just having exercised their democratic right to protest. I have had reports from them that they are being victimized even after that. One particular young person that was engaged in that protest, the police stopped that person, stopped the vehicle that they were driving to say, oh, this wasn't the vehicle that person was driving that was protesting on St. Road. This is the level at which the government is operating. I want to remind persons that are listening right now, and also remind you, Mr. Harris, that when we go out and we exercise our democratic right to protest, the government send the Guyana police force to operate as cameramen and camerawomen to photograph each and every protester that is engaged in protest every single time we go out to protest. And they are using that information, those photographs, now to identify individuals and to victimize them after they leave the protest line.
Yeah, I want to add to what my colleague said, Adam, on that question. And it has to do with that very last part of people being photographed and having your information used. And we believe also that part of the security apparatus in the cameras that are being set up is are being used for that purpose, for tracking persons via artificial intelligence, tracking your movements. And my colleague is right. When you see some people come, and police inclusive too, are flashing your photographs on these protests and asking your names and so on, because they are tracking your movements. Now, let's take, for instance, in the vicinity of the office of the president. that is a no-fly area for drones. You can't even ask authorization to fly there. And yet, when you're on the ground there are drones in that area. It means these are drones that are being facilitated by the state. They have access when ordinarily there is no access to that area. To that area. Incredibly, you would see the same photograph, the drone photographs from protests in the office of the president, land on sites like Live in Guyana or Live in Guyana, right? Interestingly, you would see those drone photographs, but all of that is part of monitoring who is going where and the movements of people generally. Mind you, we have asked questions on how this information, this AI information is being stored, who has access for it and all of that through the National Assembly. And we're still waiting for those questions to even be placed on the order paper to allow us the opportunity to ask those questions. So we have some very, very strong concerns about the tracking of individuals for state purposes because they don't want the dissent. But we're going to continue with our protest. Edghill and Indar must go, float the boat.
Yep.
Thank you. Floor is still open for questions.
And also, sorry, I really wanted to add there, not only as it concerns the vendors outside this area who might have been part of this protest activity, it is alleged, but I wanted to underscore there that Wilson Martin, who is the chairman of the Buxton Falls Neighborhood Democratic Council there, he wanted to be part of the Melanie consultation on the model village, and he was expelled. Here is a chairman of a community who is expelled from a consultation. Why? Because of the perception, and his counselors, the perception you might hold a differing view. When we were at the Hope Primary School trying to be part of that consultation there, a senior policeman came up to us. He never asked, would you like to be part of this event? He never asked why we were even standing on the facade of that nursery school. He just came and started issuing instructions to go back beyond the barrier. So we understand it acutely how this state is approaching this issue of persons they perceive not to hold a similar view to theirs, and this heavy-handed nature of the government. I want to underscore too, we have taken note of what Minister Onish Waldron said in the early days of this whole tragedy, when she talked about misinformation and the penalties that will be forthcoming to anybody who spread misinformation about the MV Barima issue. And this government has spread the most misinformation on this MV Barima issue. I want to underscore also, we suddenly see parameters of protest being set by the Attorney General concerning protests soon after the Linden protest. Suddenly they're telling you how you must protest, in what form and manner. These are the people who were trying to overturn a minister's vehicle at Pegasus, talking about barriers of democracy. And also, as I'm on the AG, we have taken note as well, the AG talking about who is in contempt. If you have strong opinions about the conduct of the CCJ president in this recent instance of this scandal concerning the leaked emails and all of that, not talking about the veracity of the arguments that are being made in those leaked emails, if they were leaked, but concerning any opinions that you might have that don't sync, are not in sync with theirs, about people being held in contempt. This is madness. We have taken note of it. We have taken note of it. I've seen the AG has gone so far as to say people who are in a live, who are commenting on a live video that there's going to come a point when he's suing people and all of that. We've taken note.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Marvin Cato, I believe is the name. I believe you're still mute.
Good morning, Marvin Cato, Nike News. You hear me?
Good morning. Yes, we're hearing you now.
I have two questions, but not on the press statement.
You can go ahead.
First question. This morning, the party put out a statement on claims regarding approaches to party members. How do you intend as a party to prevent defects due to employment opportunities or financial inducements?
Did you hear the question?
I'd be grateful if you repeat.
Could you repeat the question, please?
This morning, the party released a statement on claims regarding approaches to party members by the government. How do you intend as a party to prevent defects due to employment opportunities or financial inducements?
If I can take the first go at this question, political parties, particularly political parties in opposition, and particular political parties in opposition in a government that has oil-rich resources would have these issues. This is not unique to Guyana. I want to start by saying that what the real question is how do we hold the government accountable, and how is it that we move forward when government has this stance? The problem that we're having now is not the people not having finances or being enticed by financial incentives. The issue that we're having in this country is that the government requires you to be a party member. They require you to be submissive to their will. They require you to be used for their photo ops in order for you to be able to make living in this country. That is the issue. This is not the individual. The issue is the PPP administration and how they operate in this country. The issue that we're having is one that can only be fixed by removing the PPP from office. Leading on to the 2025 elections, we had so many different meetings we were having with persons. And one thing was always repeated and clear is that the PP administration is only concerned with enriching themselves and persons closely associated in their circles. And that's what you're seeing right now. And I want to say to persons that that may believe that they have to cower and to bend the knee to the wicked administration of the day. Being in the proximity of power doesn't make you powerful. At the end of the day, those persons still need representation. They still need to be heard. And we will continue to give representation to each and every one of them because we understand where they are and we will continue to fight for them. So in no way would we stop fighting for them. I want to say to everyone who is out there trying to make ends meet, trying to feed your family, there will come a next election and you will have the power to remove yourself from the shackles of the PPP administration because you will have the power to go to the polls and vote them out and vote in an administration that will not require you to bend the knee, to be submissive, to let go of your sense of pride and self-worth and dignity. We will be fighting for you. And when that time comes, it is only up to you to make that change for your own survival and your future.
Thank you. You had another question. I believe you said two. You're muted again.
Sorry, those elected persons that changed allegiance, have they indicated that they will give up their posts? If not, what can you do to ensure these positions?
If I can go once more. Thus far, we have had no indication by those persons that hold elected offices that they will be resigning from those offices. We have spoken about this prior when there was someone else with a similar situation. And I want to say this, it speaks to your characteristics and your sense of values as an individual for you to sit comfortably on the votes of persons that voted for the APNU when you are not representing the APNU. It says to the Guyanese public that you are not an individual that can be trusted with any sense of authority, because you will abuse the very voters' trust that put you in that position. At the end of the day, we do not have the legal power to remove those persons from those offices. But what we do have is our voice, and we will remind those persons that the seats that they are sitting in was afforded to them based on the voters that did not vote for the PPP administration. And the only decent, self-respecting thing for them to do is to resign from those seats. If they do not resign from those seats, what they are simply saying to the tens of thousands of persons that did not vote for the PP administration, that they do not value their opinion and they would prefer to trample on the votes that they were entrusted with. And that is not a place that I believe that no self-respecting individual should want to be in. They have moved on to a different political movement, and the only decent thing to do is to further resign and to have persons that still represent the interests of persons that voted for the APNU to occupy those seats to represent the people how they want to be represented.
I want to add to that. I agree with my colleague there, and I want to call on those persons to do the honorable thing. You were not placed there by the votes of anyone voting for PPP. You were placed there by persons who voted for APNU. And as an individual, you should be happy to demonstrate you're a trustworthy person, you're a person that people can rely on. But the fact that you would choose to sit on a seat with somebody else's vote and work for the opposite, work for the persons who are oppressing them, doesn't speak well for that individual. So we want to encourage those persons to do the right thing, resign the position, and let the right set of people go there to represent the interests of Guyanese people and not self-interest.
Thank you. The floor is still open for questions.
Yes, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think it was you, Mr. Duncan, who said that the AG is talking about content, or was it Mr. Nance? I'm trying to remember.
Mr. Duncan.
Mr.
Now,
Duncan.
I don't know in what context he could accuse anyone of contempt for commenting on the chairman, Winston Anderson. What was he alleging? That if you talk about Anderson, somebody can charge you for contempt? What was the contempt?
Adam, it's interesting because part of his rationale is that the strong language that is being used by some persons about the president of the CCJ, Justice Winston Anderson, can bring the administration of justice of the CCJ into disrepute. Now, it wasn't any member of the public who penned what was contained in those emails. And if those allegations do not bring the administration of justice into disrepute for the CCJ, nothing else will. And in addition to that, I want to remind Guyanese, it is the very CCJ that in the recent past said the Attorney General's action and Anil Nandalal's actions brought the administration of justice of the CCJ into disrepute when he had gone ahead and said that the court would rule in a certain way. And the court took great offense to that and said specifically his actions brought the administration of justice for the CCJ into disrepute. So to see him now coming to say that others might do the same, he has no moral authority on this issue. But I understand why he has to come out and be defensive, not about the CCJ, but about the CCJ president and his conduct. I have noted in the past few days, the Organization of American States, their bar association, I think the Eastern Caribbean states, their bar association as well, not only spoke to the leaked emails and an investigation about that separately, but spoke to the veracity of these statements. And the fact of the matter is that the statements and allegations that were made and contained in these quote-unquote leaked emails have to be investigated as well. I would love to hear the Attorney General on that, because no amount of sidetracking and distraction should be able to point us away from what was contained in those emails. And by any stretch of the imagination, those were some very damning allegations that are contained in those emails. And we feel very acutely about this matter too. Aubrey Norton is the leader of the PNCR and leader of the APNU, and he was approached by the CCJ president for a certain course of action. And it was, the leader has said he felt very strange about what was happening. He discontinued the overtures by the president of the CCJ, and we feel strongly about those actions as well. And no amount of threatenings by the Attorney General will call us into silence. You can't buy us with $5,000 and a box of cook-up on this side. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, but who will file these contempt charges? I mean, they must have a charge, and you must have someone prosecuting those charges. Is Anil going to file those contempt charges?
And Adam, for all intents and purposes, it is my studied opinion that the AG is just blowing hot air, and he's a man who's very familiar with wind. See, he's blowing a lot of hot air.
Yeah, but there is, and I must add at this one, there's a reason why he's blowing that hot air. The reason why he's blowing that hot air is because he wants to put fear into Guyanese. He wants to scare people into silence, and that is the PP administration. That is why they go and take photos of protesters. That is why the AG is going to go online and say that he's going to file this and he's going to bring charges against person. $10 million ahead, I think that's what he said. Right? There's a reason why they're doing that. They're doing that because the advent of social media is something that they cannot yet wrap their minds around. They're trying desperately every day to silence the voices of the public, and they are failing tremendously to silence those voices, because it's one thing to have a few persons out in a protest line, but to have tens of thousands of people commenting critically about your administration online, that's not something that they have gotten hold of. And they try desperately to scare people into submission. So that is the real reason behind it. That is the real reason why the Minister of Home Affairs came out and issued that threat before. They want to silence the Guyanese public, but it is not working because, and I don't know if they're not looking at the responses, but every time they come out and they make a threat to the Guyanese citizens right now, the criticisms are multiplied. What they're doing is not working, and they need to realize that, because today is not 2026, it's not 10 years ago. Persons are more emboldened when it comes to having their voices heard, particularly on the social media platforms, and we are happy to see it. So no amount of threatening or attempts to silence those voices will work. And that is what the PP administration and their mouthpieces need to realize.
Thank you. I see the hand of Mr. Marvin, sorry.
Yes. The fire chief recently responded to criticisms of officers using buckets to carry water. In 2023, the Minister of Home Affairs then, when the building was being handed over, he told authorities, he said any defects in the building identified will be fixed during the fixed liability period, right? The completion certificate, he said, will be issued after that would have taken place. Now, this is 2026. The payment seemingly was needed, yet still, we see they are now complaining that issues that were in 2023 are submitted in 2026. Let's see, Mr. Duncan.
Well, You know, it's interesting again that the fire chief is the one who has been paraded out there to make this statement. It is laughable, and you've underscored what needed to be done in what period. They have been occupying this building all this time, and he has just woken up and seen these defects. Why is it? Why is it? Don't let's stop there. We can go back to the awarding of the contract. Who awarded the contract? What ministries they were attached to? What has become of those persons since that time? Don't let's stop just with the defects of this particular building, right? Because this seems to be a pattern with contractors, not just Mohammed Enterprises. I think the fire chief quoted as the contractor. We have seen this as a course of conduct with many contractors across projects. So don't let us just limit it to just the construction of this fire station. Like if this is some anomaly, this is the course of conduct of many contractors, right? And I would want to get some independent views of this work, because we understand what is happening here. All of a sudden, again, MP Finance, and we just finished discussing the attempt of this government to silence people, and out of the blues, the fire chief just remember, oh, the roof leaking, oh, the floor, oh, the banister, oh, the paint. He just wake up to this realization: we are not fooled. We see you, PPP.
Yes, and I might add, the firemen, the persons in the building, they have seen what has happened to those 3 workers from the MV Barima, the 3 individuals charged for murder, and they should take the necessary steps to protect themselves as workers in the environment that is unsafe. So the fire chief got to come out and say what he has to say, but the workers there, I'm saying to you, learn from what we see happening with the tragedy of the MV Barima. It's important that workers stand for the rights.
Thank you. All right. At this, go ahead.
We want yours?
I'll take your question. Of course, I'll take your question.
All right. Sister Nima, talk to me about these men in custody. I know lawyers were meeting with them. Are the meetings constant? Will the lawyers advise these people? Become more the charge, got a whole lot of the implications.
Yeah.
Will the lawyers advise them to appear before this commission of inquiry?
Thank you. As I'm aware that the lawyers are doing what they're supposed to do in terms of meeting with these men in custody, and I'm confident that they're giving the right legal guidance as to how they should proceed with what is happening. In my opinion, I think even as the lawyers are doing what they have to do, the families really need that kind of support, as well as guidance in helping to manage the stress of having a loved one they are locked away in the prison and being charged for such a crime as murder, which we know is unjustly imposed on those men. So yes, I believe the lawyers are doing what they're supposed to do to ensure that those men receive the right representation that is needed at this time.
Yeah, and also, Adam, I think the state has some responsibility here again in terms of delineating the boundaries, because we have a number of things happening on parallel tracks here. You have this criminal prosecution. We have the commission inquiry that is happening. We have the maritime safety audit that is happening as well. We have the police investigation. And we know that all of them may seek evidence from the same witnesses, agencies, and accused persons. So the state also has some responsibility as well. And the government should publish the protocol covering whether accused persons can be compelled to testify before the commission, what protections are there against self-incrimination. The government should do this. Whether the commission's testimony may be used in criminal proceedings, whether police have access to confidential commission documents, the sequencing of the police and commission interviews, the protection of potentially vulnerable witnesses. All of this we need to know about. The defense, whether the defense can access the recovered vessel when it is recovered, the handling, let us know about the handling of expert reports, the publication of allegations not yet tested in the context of a court. So the government, because you have all of these overlapping things, thanks to them, should be the one to tell us the parameters in which we will be moving forward. I note that today is the date where the end date for MARA to accept expressions of interest from specially salvaged firms. It is closing today, and so there will be a number of things we are looking forward to from MARA. A shortlisting date, a contract award date, mobilization, the earliest mobilization date, payment structure, funding source. All of this is information we are looking to the government for, but all we see is opacity, right? And more muddied waters. So the government has a lot of explaining to do, and the more they try to siphon off information, to misdirect, to conceal, is the more questions are being asked. And so the lawyers, no doubt, will advise their clients, but the government overarchingly must explain to us how all of these trains will run on parallel tracks, and we don't subtract from any of the different things that are happening. Guyanese need to be informed. I don't know if we have closed off the updating period. I haven't seen any updates from the Prime Minister. They seem to have gone back into silence, into a comatose state. But this is what we are accustomed to from the Prime Minister. The nation needs answers. The nation needs clarity.
Thank you. At this time,
While you're the chair,
go ahead.
man,
No, I was going to say I have space for at least two other questions.
At this time,
you don't say just now. You don't say just
Go
now.
ahead.
Sheriff, to get back your drone, 1. 2, what is the status of the charge they threatened you with? And the last question is, this new fire station that the Mohammed built, was it ever commissioned?
it was commissioned very quietly. It was commissioned quietly because it was commissioned after the fallout. It was commissioned very quietly. On the issue of the drone, the issue remains the same. The police had I was charged, if I remember correctly, but my lawyer, Dr. Deodat, keeps checking with the court in Charity, and they keep saying the same thing, that nothing has been filed with the court. If the government is unsure how to proceed, I would love to have my drone back, quite frankly, right? I would love to have my drone back. They don't seem to want to press forward with the matter, and again, there's just been silence.
All right, I have room for one other question.
I like this girl. If there is no other person,
You can go ahead.
the last thing I want to talk about. Everybody talks about victimization. I don't work no way. Nobody ain't paying me, and I don't feel as though I can be victimized. So what's this fear of victimization? I mean, you can lose your job. If you're a public servant, that has technicalities. What is this victimization that people talk so much about?
Victimization could also be denial of access to services, right? Again, because remember, there is such a profuse collection of data now. You can easily be tracked in the system. Is like if you person have had the experience in the past where you might have terminated a service, let's say with GT&T. You didn't pay your bill, but you apply for service later on. That is still in the system, right? And they have the ability to track you. That is what is so alarming now with this wanton accumulation of data without the requisite protection. You see how many converging issues we have here. This is what we've been talking about: the collection of data, and you don't have the legislation that has been activated to offer you the protections that you need. When we say, what are you doing with this data? Who has access to it? Where it is being stored? Onshore, offshore, and what it is being used for. We have the experience of the 2025 election. People who had applied for the cash grant being called and asked their voting preference, which direction they're going, and all of that. This is being multiplied, and we know that people are being tracked. So the victimization might not just be the loss of job. If you don't have a job, you have none to fear. It might be access to your $100,000 cash grant. It might be access to some healthcare service. You might be waiting longer for something. People see it in their daily lives, and so they are cautious. I mean, there are thousands of people who are speaking up every day, and it isn't the usual suspect. And that is why the government is even more worried. But there are a number of ways, because of how the system is interconnected, to track people and to victimize them, to marginalize them.
Yeah. I was going to add to what you were saying. I know somebody that is currently being victimized as a person that depends for this on the government for public assistance. This individual would have been usually on the protest line, speaking out and so on. When they go now to get the public assistance book, it's a whole go wrong, come wrong, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. And I have even gone so far to report, call to see if this individual will get the book. I don't think the individual got the book as yet. And all of that are forms of victimization, the system, the things that are there. Or there might be a person like me who unmarked vehicle, or a vehicle just show up in front of your house and park up and try to intimidate you. Or on the street that you're driving, or like the other day, somebody just drive into me very closely the roundabout, and I took serious note, because I know I pay attention to where I saw the vehicle before and why that was happening on the roadways, even as you drive. So, these people can be victimized in so many ways.
If I may, on this, to make it clear, for an example, as my colleagues would have just stated, there are many, many ways that this government currently chooses to victimize persons. I can tell you from personal experience, it is your job, your family member job. Once you're in the same household and they feel that they will lessen your income, that is what I face. They figured out they couldn't immediately send me home. 2020, I received a call that my partner then had to go home because they couldn't send me home. And they waited until the procedure and the time frame that they could have sent me home. I was called about the scholarship that I received, and the person said to me, quite frankly, they were planning to pull it, but the scholarship was already completed. I recently had an engagement at a meeting of professionals, and they were discussing cameras and the setting, etc. And I questioned certain elements of it to a commander of a division. And the commander of that division looked at me and said something to me in the effect as, "Don't worry, we cameras to see everything," and called a place that I would usually frequent. This commander have no authority. It's a different division. That is to the extent of which the PPPC goes in terms of victimization. And while the question was asked earlier about persons leaving and talking about the recent pictures we've seen of young people posing with Deodat, victimization is the cause. And victimization in Guyana, it's a horrible phenomenon. And whether young, middle-aged, or old, when people feel that their backs are against the wall, they will do things that they believe at the time that will benefit them. And like my colleague rightfully said, the only way, and this is a serious responsibility on all citizens, the only way we can rid ourselves of this era that we have entered in is when the citizens of this country hold the government accountable in the right manner. Under an APNU government, there were protests about varying things, parking meters. The teachers protested. Their payments weren't stopped to the GTU. The GTU president was a member of the APNU. People protested and their rights were respected. And that is the core. Your rights being respected as a citizen should be your guaranteed right in a proper state. But as we are right now, we're operating as though we are in a failed state. And hence we're seeing these issues, and victimization under the PPP happens in any and every form. Therefore, the citizens have a right to hold them accountable. And we hope that when that opportunity comes again, that citizens will hold one head, remembering all of these incidents, and hold this government accountable by putting them out, ensuring that Indar and Edghill never have the chance again to see this nation at that level of tragedy.
I want to add my voice.
You talking about election, you expect election? Sorry.
Adam, if I may, I would like to add my voice to your question, and particularly I'm interested in the way in which you structured your question. You said, you're not working with anybody. So person, what is this fear of victimization? I want to say to persons, if you were to look at the labor force survey, you would see that more than half of Guyana's population is actually catered for in the informal employment aspect, meaning that they are not working with any formal structure of employment. Those persons that are out there, a lot of times people say you're hustling, you're making sure you do what you have to do to make ends meet at the end of the day. To think for any second that you are insulated from victimization would be an error. I want to say that this country, we have less than 1 million people in Guyana, and all systems are tightly integrated. Everything overlaps. The players that controls each and every agency are interconnected, and it is easy for them to pinpoint and victimize anyone, regardless of whether or not you are employed formally or informally in this country. I want to tell persons right now, it is very important for you to know that victimization does not come in one form. Victimization comes in many forms. And one of the main ways the government seeks to victimize persons in this country is through hitting a financial victimization pathway. There's financial victimization, there is psychological victimization, there is actually digital or cyber victimization as well. And we can see a lot of that coming from the government. When it comes to cyber victimization, what you would see is if somebody starts speaking out against the administration online, you would see the government utilizing taxpayers' dollars when they have these armies of trolls going out to have the cyber victimization of those individuals. When it comes to the financial victimization, regardless of whether or not you are employed by the state or you are formally employed and you have to answer to any boss, if you are your own boss, you have to get money from somewhere. And in this country with a budget of $1.558 trillion, you are going to be dependent on money being received through methods that are codependent of the state resources as well. You're not standing alone. And once you go out there and you speak out against the government, they will financially blacklist you, and that is a form of financial victimization. Persons have spoken about, and you did mention, and I want to just tie it in directly to how you structured your question. You did say that there are so many loopholes, well, you didn't say loopholes, but you said there are so many things that has to be done, and if even you're a public servant, in order for you to lose your job. And I want to tell you that that's where the psychological victimization comes into play. When a government wants to remove persons from within their system, they do everything in their power to psychologically victimize those individuals and to frustrate them. And they use every mechanism in the system to frustrate them until they get rid of those persons. They would move persons around. If they can't immediately fire them, if they're contractually bound to that person, they would move them from one location to the next just to try to frustrate the individual. They will remove direct responsibilities from them within office spaces. They will remove them from the desk that they were sitting at and push them in a corner at the back of a room somewhere. They will do everything in their power to break that individual into submission using every means and channel available to them. And that is the PPP administration. So when we're talking about victimization, I don't want anybody to go away with the idea that if you are self-employed, that you are insulated from victimization by the state. It is not possible for you to be insulated when the state is moving around with being shielded by executive power. And that is just the fact of the day. So let us look at victimization for what it truly is. It's not a cut and paste. It is not a one size fits all. It is directly meted out to everyone that is speaking out against the state. And even for students, I just want to add that in, even for university students, that they are not even, some of them are not even employed as yet. They're not even employed as yet, and they face victimization. Persons threaten them, they play with their psyche. And a lot of times I tell people the PPP deals with psychological warfare. They play with their psyche to say, you shouldn't say anything. You should be quiet. You don't want them to sideline you. You don't want your opportunities to be blocked in the future. Those are the real issues that we're facing. And that's the victimization that persons are facing every day in this country once they speak out against the PPP administration.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on elections, I hear everybody talking about when elections come. GCOM at the moment isn't meeting because the chairman has a problem with the opposition commissioners. There have been no meeting of GCOM. So do you see local government or any other election coming up in the near future?
Anybody? I don't think that at this stage, the way the government operates, you can predict on that at the moment. There is a lot of back and forth happening in terms of what is happening in GCOM. And as I said, it is the citizens' responsibility to put pressure on the government and its systems in place to have these things working. And we somehow, even those who are within the public sector and outside of the public sector, we have to find a way to stand together if we want to see a nation that can move forward and, work in a better way. We have to stand together as a people, period. I did say one last question, but I see the hand of Mr. Mark DeCosta, and I'll take him as our last question for today. You can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay. I'm Mark DeCosta. I'm representing the Voice News. I was just now able to join your press conference because I was invited, but I was not previously. I could not get on to the press conference Zoom set. And it resonates with me what Deodat just said, that dissenting voices are often locked out. And I, as a journalist, I try to be fair in what I say. And cannot, take a side. However, it's difficult not to take a side. Then one side is obviously compromised. So it's difficult not to take a side under those circumstances. One, I was wondering why I'm not being allowed to join the conference, because I was trying all the time. I got the information to join the press conference. I wanted to
So,
be a part of this.
if I may on that,
So I'm
we usually,
go ahead.
when the link is sent out, there are no waiting rooms, no barriers. Once you click on that link, you should generally be able to get in. So I'm sorry that you weren't earlier for whatever reason. I'm not sure about that, because there are no barriers in terms of how you enter once that link is provided. You have another question?
That's the primary one. Given that I have not seen the previous undertakings within this press conference, I'm asking this, or I'm saying this. It would make it very much easier on journalists that following each press conference that you put out a press statement, which I know that you do. I know that you do that. And I would just like to reinforce that helps journalists, because we will see stuff in print, and we can actually work with that.
Okay.
No problem.
Secondly, yeah. Secondly, the sinking of the ferry. Where do you stand on that? Maybe I am duplicating a question because I couldn't get into the press conference earlier. I'm sorry. For whatever reason.
All right.
Maybe they
So we presented basically a three-part statement today, and basically two of those statements are on our Stands Today MV and the investigation that we hope to see. So we will definitely put out that statement like we usually do immediately at the end of this presser, and as well the video recording of the presser will be available on our platforms as well. I'm very sorry you were unable to come in earlier. All right, so you will have that. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. I can assure you that the Voice News will carry.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. I want to thank our media personnel for joining today's press conference. And it was a privilege having the discussions that we had today. And we do hope that our viewing audience as well have a wonderful weekend as we enter this afternoon period where most of you like to relax. I know there's a lot happening in our society right now, but use the opportunity to take a break, relax a little, take a mental chill, as the young people would say. Do have a wonderful weekend.